This is a video that I have talked about making for 10 years. And I'm not even sure if anybody will ever hear it or see it. I may just file it away and never look at it again. But it's something that I need to record. I need to tell what I know, how I know it. And I'm a preacher's daughter. My dad is a Free Will Baptist minister. He rejected Calvinism and went over to Free Will Baptist way before I was born. I was born in 1953. I had an older brother who was 3 years older than me. Before I was born, I'm not going to talk about my dad's. I'm not going to talk about my dad's mission. I'm going to stay on my own. So I'm not going to go into explaining what made him the preacher that he felt he needed to become. But I do want to tell you about mine. So I never knew anything. My dad was a very volatile man. He had a hair trigger temper. And thankfully, by the fact that he was born again before I was born, he didn't kill us. But that's the only reason. If he hadn't have been a preacher, he would have probably beat my brother and I to death. Because he almost did anyway. But we'll go there in a minute. So he had his issues, he had his problems. When I was 3 years old, I had my cousins were over visiting. I had one cousin, he was a guy, he was the same age as I was. And he and I were playing in my room, and then his brothers were off running with my brother. But there weren't any girls. I was the only girl. I was always the only girl. This was from birth. I was always the only girl. So my cousin and I, we were both 3 years old. We were both in diapers, those rubber paints. You remember those? We were in rubber paints. I remember it so well. When I tell this, it's almost as if I'm living it all over again. The smells, the feels, the sights. I can see the room right now. When I close my eyes, I see all the colors. I see the furniture. I see the bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. I see the stairs that went up. The whole thing just zooms back into my head. And when I tell the story, I live it again. So forgive me. But I'm going to tell it honestly, completely. I'm not going to make it skip any of the parts. Because it's not a pretty story. And I was just a baby. And I didn't understand. And I didn't until I was about 45 years old. But when I did finally understand that and the other traumas I'm going to tell you about, when I did finally understand them, I completely shut down. And I had to rebuild my life over. But that first trauma when I was 3 years old, in diapers, I was in a closet with my cousin, and he put a crayon in me. Apparently we got quiet, because my dad came in and saw what was happening. He jerked me by my arm out of a closet that was under those stairs that I referred to. There was a little closet underneath. That's where we had all our toys and everything, That's just kind of where we played, in that closet. And my baby bed with the rails on it was over against that wall. And then I had a little girl's table and chairs, and I had a dollhouse, that bullshit. But he jerked me out of that closet by my arm. And when I say he jerked me out of that closet by my arm, I can still see my arm in his hand in my mind's eye, as clear as daylight. He dangled me in the air by my arm. And my pants and diaper was on my knee, around my knees. And he beat me in the air in front of my cousins and my cousins' parents and my brother. All of them. Nothing was said to that other kid. I was the victim, but I got beat. When he got through beating me, he physically tossed me into my bed, instead of walking over and putting me in my bed. And then he took the blanket and jerked it over the bed and tinted it. He didn't even cover me. He tinted the bed over me. I remember that 3-year-old child laying in that bed. I remember seeing the slats on around me. And I remember trying to figure out, what did I do? What did I do? I didn't know. I had no idea. All I knew was that from that moment on, I couldn't trust nobody. Preacher or not, parent or not. And my mother stood there and watched it and let it happen and did not make an effort to comfort me. No. She didn't go over and lift it like, oh, baby, it's going to be okay. He just got mad. You're all right. You didn't do anything. No. It was never spoken of again. It was never addressed again. And it resided in my 3-year-old mind for 45 years. It was 40 years before I ever saw that cousin again. We never saw them again. They never came to our house again. Excuse me for my son. That's my sunglasses. I never saw that cousin again for 40 years. 40 years later, when I did see him at a family reunion, I was as ashamed as that 3-year-old child was, facing him. I've seen him that one time in my entire life. That was my first trauma. That was at 3. My second one was at about 6. My dad was a hell and brimstone preacher, and he was the kind of preacher that stomped up and down and yelled and screamed and spit and talked about burning in hell and talked about the meaning of eternity and talked about gnashing of teeth and you're going to be begging for somebody to put a drop of water in your mouth forever. Do you know what forever is? Over and over and over and over. The burning flames of hell. You are going to be dumped into the burning flames of hell, 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 hell. I heard it every Sunday, every Wednesday. And I got it beat down my throat on revivals. And it was all hell-based. It was all fear-based. It was all, you got to come up here. You got to let us pray over you. You got to get baptized. You got to join your church. And you got to pay tithes or you're going to hell. I was 6 years old. There was another facet of my dad's religion that affected this trauma in a great way. If any of you have ever attended any of these, dogmatic Christian churches, they really like nothing better than a good testimony. I have seen preachers let their entire service be other people's testimonies. And they're all, every one of them, no exception. Every single one of them want to talk to you about how much they changed. Oh, I was just a horrible person. There was no hope for me. I was a drunk. I was this. I was that. But I gave my life to the Lord. I have been born again, and I have been baptized, and I have changed. I am a changed person. Okay? And I sat in church and I listened to that over and over and over and over. Now, this is a 6-year-old child that had already been traumatized at the age of 3. and didn't really know why and didn't understand it. So I was a very traumatized child already at 6. My brother and I both were. My brother was a bedwetter. He wet the bed until he left home. I was a rocker. I rocked myself to sleep. I had rocked myself so vigorously to sleep that I broke down my baby bed. I broke down my twin bed. I broke down every bed I slept in because I got on all fours and I shifted back and forth. I did that until I left home when I got married. I was terrified when I got married whether I could even sleep or not if I couldn't do that. That's how I put myself to sleep until I left home. And my brother pissed the bed until he left home. So that tells you how neurotic we were. You know, we weren't normal. We weren't healthy. You know, there was no love or affection in our house. There was no, here, honey, let me make you feel better. No, 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 no. There was no crawling up in mama's lap. No, 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 no. It didn't happen. Children in our household was to be seen and not heard. We had no rights. We had no opinions. You didn't have that right until you were out from underneath that roof. Until then, you lived in a dogmatic, zealot atmosphere. So when I was 6 years old, I had reoccurring nightmares of burning in hell. I would dream about it every night. Of course I would. I was 6. I was terrified. That's all I heard. And instead of coming to me and picking me up and say, oh, baby, it's going to be all right. Oh, don't worry about it. Oh, you're just a child. You will not go to hell. No, no. Because honestly, let's be honest, even in that religion, children don't go to hell. You know, I, as a 6-year-old, I would not have gone to hell, no matter what I'd have done. You know, I had no sins. I had nothing to repent. I had nothing to be saved from or for. But I honestly believed that if I got saved and got baptized at 6 years old, if I got saved and I got baptized, that I would miraculously change. And I wouldn't be that neurotic, scared kid anymore. I wouldn't get beat anymore. You know, my dad was the kind that, you know, at dinner, if something came out of my mouth that didn't set really right with him, he'd box my mouth. He'd smack my lips. I mean, backhanded, knocked me off my chair on occasion. And I was afraid to ask what I said because he hit me again. I didn't really, sometimes I didn't know what I said. Sometimes I did, you know, I did kind of have, you know, I was defiant as hell. I was defiant. I was a defiant child. I always have been, always will be. I have always been a divergent, accept nothing, question everything. And I accepted nothing and questioned everything from my childhood on. And here's the reason why. So I got saved and I got baptized, but I didn't change. I was still the same kid. And it was like I was saying before, I had no sins. I had nothing to be forgiven for. I had nothing to be changed because I was a child. There was nothing about me that needed to be forgiven and changed in the name of God. And I expected this miraculous difference. I expected that I wouldn't get whipped anymore. I expected I wouldn't have a smart mouth anymore, you know, because I had a smart mouth. But I was smart, you know. I didn't fully buy that Christian thing. I didn't fully buy it, you know, because I seen holes in it that Daddy couldn't answer. I couldn't understand why just Free Will Baptists were going to be in heaven. I couldn't understand that. My child mom would not allow me to understand that. It just wouldn't. And he couldn't explain it to me. And that was the first crack in the wall. And when I got saved and baptized and everything, and I was still that kid that walked on eggshells and was terrified of their parents. And then I watched them in church, and people was just hugging them and loving them, telling them how absolutely, you're so wonderful. Oh, you're such a good preacher. Oh, that was such a good message. If they'd have known that he had beat both of his kids with his belt before he left home, would they have said that? Probably not. They didn't know that. My brother and I did. We knew it. Oh, we didn't forget. So that was my 6-year-old trauma. At 10 years old, and then there was some shit I'm sure that happened in between there, but these are the traumas that I have found and dealt with through therapy. And these are my 3 childhood traumas. I call them my religious child abuse traumas, because they were child abuse and they were religious abuse in the same. So at 10 years old, I was in the 3rd grade, and one of my little friends named Donna asked me to spend the night with her. And my parents said I could. Shock of all shocks. I didn't think they would let me go. I really didn't. And I really didn't even want to ask, because I just didn't want it. It wasn't worth the drama. But I did, and they let me. And I remember distinctly, it was a Wednesday night. Mom and Dad had gone to church that night, of course. And just so happened the church was only about 4 miles from my girlfriend's house. But they went to church on Wednesday night, and of course people in the church said, "Oh, well, where's Mickey at? Oh, well, she's spending the night with so-and-so over here." Oh, no, you're kidding. They drink. They don't go to church. They could be perverts. As soon as my dad left church, he came to her house, dragged me out of the house by the arm, with me screaming, "Why?" I never knew. He never told me. And it was a lie. It was immaterial. It was church hate. It was church hate. Church people can be hateful. And that was hateful. And my dad dragging me out of there was hateful. And I never had a sleepover again. And Donna was never my friend again. Never. By the time I graduated from high school, I didn't give a damn anymore. I didn't care. I was born in 1953. I graduated from high school in 1971. I was a hippie. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll was my anthem. That's what I lived for. I wasn't afraid of God, because God didn't want me. He showed me He didn't want me. He didn't change me, so He didn't want me. And if I couldn't change, then I couldn't be what Daddy wanted. So then I just didn't care anymore. I didn't try anymore. And I became a rebellious, protesting hippie. Tube tops, bell bottoms, pot, LSD, uppers, downers, whatever I could find. At that point in time, somebody say, "Here, you want this?" Yeah. You didn't really know where you'd go. And it didn't really matter. And I made it through every time. I'm still here. But those are my 3 childhood traumas that I base on the church, the hate of the church. The hate in church, I think, facilitated my traumas. In my life, I had 3 narcissists that man controlled. My mother was a narcissist. My father was her enabler. My second husband was a narcissist. And my best friend was a narcissist. And they all tormented me with my empathy, if that makes sense. And I learned a whole lot. And each one is its story in itself. Each one. I had been in denial about my child abuse most of my life, because I had been convinced that it was just me, that I was the bad one. I was the black sheep. It wasn't really my brother. My brother was the perfect child. He made good grades. He did what he was told. I was in trouble with capital T. I was my dad's worst nightmare. I did horrible things in the church. But when I graduated from high school, I had to be in at 11 o'clock. It didn't matter what. I was starting to graduate. You know, we were having graduation parties, we were having senior get-togethers, we were having senior trips, we were having proms, and I wanted to take part in all of them, and he wouldn't let me take part in any of them. None of them. I could go, but I had to be home at 11 o'clock, you know. Like, I couldn't get in trouble before 11, so I had a point to prove. So I made as much trouble before 11 as I possibly could. And I had a good time. I enjoyed myself a lot. I was just talking to him about that period in my life. You know, I was doing all kinds of drugs. This was 1966, 68, 69, 70, 70, 69, 70, 71. It was 3 years. 60s. And there was not an established drug culture at that time, really. And I would come home all bombed out, and my dad would want to smell my breath. I didn't drink. I didn't like beer and wine. Either one, still don't. But I smoked a lot of pot, took a lot of pain, you know. I mean, I did it all. I experimented with everything. Heroin, crank, lots of coke. But I don't do any of it because it was not what I wanted. It was not what I was looking for. I don't like being out of control. But I am a pothead. I've smoked pot since I was 13. Still do, always will. Thank you, Virginia, for legalizing it for me. But that's it for today. Yeah. I think that I have given you a pretty good picture of what made that damaged child who graduated from high school fight so hard to be exactly who she wanted to be. I'm 71, and I am exactly who I want to be. No thanks to anybody. No thanks to anybody. My parents didn't help me. I did it with self-love, self-confidence, and self-respect. You got to start right there. Without any of those three, you're spinning your